achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson, and on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC on Fox 7 event on April 20th, featuring the UFC's lightweight champion, Benson Henderson, defending his title in a unification bout against the last man to wear the Strikeforce title, Gilbert El Nino Melendez. This is going to be a fantastic card, 4 main card bouts, which I'll break down in this episode, 9 preliminary fights, which I'll have for you over at the website, kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. I'm coming off a very solid night, 8-4 at UFC on Fuel, or sorry, not UFC, the Ultimate Fighter 17 finale. I have gone, I've had a great run of, I can't remember the number off, the last 3 events I've done very well in the bet packs. I have been giving money away like crazy with the bet packs, multiple winning parlays. I think of the 7 prop bets I posted last night, 5 of them hit. Confidence bets for 4 for 5, 3 value bets. I said the bet for Uriah Hall versus Kelvin Gastelum. Don't even touch Hall with a 10-foot pole. Bet on Gastelum. He came through, so that was a huge pick. That was my number 1 non-predicted winners list. So I'm telling you, get on the Fox bet packs. They're $10, $12 if you want the whole pack. I usually do very well in the Fox events. I hit it hard, so please consider investing in my bet packs. Also, the public picks, and people are voting on the public picks, but on the public picks page, if you scroll down, I'm keeping track of all the stats, and there are some very interesting trends, and they continued last night. For example, if you look on the page where it shows the percentages, if you look at when the betting public is between 51 and 54% in favor of the underdog in a fight, the underdog is now 1 in 6 in those fights. So that's telling you, right, that you see some trends, and there's other trends where guys are 80% winning when this certain scenario takes place. So take a look at those, because they are paying off, and they're hitting hard. So make sure you get in, put your votes in, and see if you can cash in some money based on the trends in the public pick section. Also, the Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament continuing to fill up. Lots of representatives, people showing up and signing up. I encourage you to sign up. It doesn't start to the end of May. It's a great tournament, head-to-head competition right to the end. So please, pay your $5, get yourself signed up. Winner gets a free t-shirt from heartandglory.com. We're trying to put some other sponsors together and some other prize packages together. But it's going to be a great night of fights coming up for UFC on Fox. And before I get into that, my predictions, quickly, I'd like to thank all of my sponsors, especially some of the ones who are grateful, like MMAcrips.com, a great website that always hosts and posts my videos. They're fantastic. There are other sites do as well. Shout out to MMABettingOdds.com, Walkoutwear, one of our sponsors, MMAcrips.com, as I said, Adrenaline Training Center, HeartandGlory.com, BoneSnapper.com, Fantasy MMA HQ. All kinds of sites. You can see all the links over at my website. But again, buy my bet packs. They are on fire right now, and I'm giving away free money. That's all I can tell you. Either way, let's get to the first prediction. Our opening prediction of the night comes in the UFC's welterweight division. As Matt the Immortal Brown, 18-11-0, battles Jordan Young Gun Meehan, 27-8-0. Brown riding a 4-fight winning streak, and Meehan has won 3 consecutive matchups. Now, taking a look at the first thing, Meehan is coming into this fight as a replacement for Dan Hardy on just over a month's notice after his debut. So quick turnaround for the young kid. While Brown, best run of his career, he's had 4 wins in a row. Very impressive. He's coming off that big-time victory over Mike Swick. First things first, Brown has never been knocked out in his career, and Meehan does have 15 wins by knockouts. That's an interesting comparison to see how that shows up. And Meehan's coming off that win over Dan Miller, who is another guy who had never been stopped. On the feet, Brown lands 3.4 strikes per minute, which is a nice number, but Meehan counters it with 4.27. He is a high output striker and really can put it on you when he wants to. Brown is a very gritty worker on his feet. He has a solid clinch game with his elbows and knees, throws some good combinations with hooks, and he does a nice job of pressuring his opponent, and he has KO power, which 9 wins by knockout is impressive, and we saw he put Mike Swick's lights out. He has a little bit of a tendency to leap into his punches, which leaves him open for counters, and we did see, even though he's never been knocked out, we did see Stephen Thompson hurt him in that fight. Meehan, very rangy striker, lethal combinations, a very stiff jab, like running into a wall when he puts it in the guy's face. Good movement, patient, brings constant pressure, and he looks for openings. He doesn't just throw his strikes hoping they land. He looks for opportunities and sticks them in those holes. Elbows along the cage are vicious. We saw him stop Santos and most recently Forrest Petts with those shots. He knows how to finish. Excellent composure as well. We saw him in that Dan Miller fight when he put Miller on the ground with the first stiff left. He didn't jump into the guard of a very dangerous ground fighter. He let him get up and went at it from there. Now, on the ground, Brown averages 1.8 takedowns per fight at a 47% clip, and he put up 5 against Stephen Thompson, which is his best performance of recent memory. 5 wins by submission overall. He's a BJJ purple belt. a judo brown belt. He really likes that Darce choke, which we saw him try against Mike Swick, and he will attack off his back. He also had Swick in a very tight triangle attempt. Now, Meehan's defensive grappling has been the biggest hole in his game. He struggled with the takedowns of Tyrone Woodley in Strikeforce. He was way too inactive on his back. He nearly got submitted by Dan Miller, but he showed good submission defense and got out of that bad position. Now, Brown, I'd say his path to victory in this is use those takedowns, put Meehan on his back, and keep him there, similar to what we did against Stephen Thompson, but Meehan a far more accomplished ground fighter. Meehan has 4 losses by submission, but none since 2008, which is 21 fights, so clearly he's tightened some things up there. For Brown, big number, 9 losses by submission, and Meehan has won 7 times by tap out, but he's attempted 0 takedowns in his 4 UFC Strikeforce bouts, so he really hasn't focused on the ground game, and I really don't expect him to here. Brown's cardio is a little bit of an issue. He takes damage, and he will slow down in grueling bouts, even though he keeps coming forward. Meehan's, this is a big push into the spotlight, but he's very experienced for his young age. I don't expect to see him crumble under the pressure. He needs to be very careful with Brown on the mat if the fight goes there. And he has been able to shut down solid grapplers before. We saw him shut down Josh Berkman. He's the only man to beat Josh Berkman in his last 9 fights, and that was a very impressive performance. Brown is still dangerous on his feet, but I like what I saw with Jordan Meehan. So my prediction is Jordan Meehan to defeat Matt Brown by TKO. Dropping down to the 155-pound weight class, former title challenger Nate Diaz, 16-8-0, battles former Strikeforce title challenger Josh the Punk Thompson, 19-5-0 with 1 no contest. As I said, Diaz coming off that loss to Benson Henderson for the title. He had won 3 prior to that. Well, Josh Thompson also coming on a loss against Gilbert Melendez in his final Strikeforce bout with the Strikeforce strap on the line. Now, Thompson has been out of action for nearly a year, which is something to take into consideration against a guy like Nate who really pushes the pace. And another thing, Diaz's camp is very familiar with what Josh Thompson brings. Josh has fought Gilbert Melendez 3 times. I'm sure they'll talk about what to expect with Thompson when you get in there. Diaz is going to have a 2-inch height advantage and a 5-inch reach advantage, which could come into play as well. Now, both guys are BJJ black belts. Thompson 9 wins by submission. Never been tapped out. Well, Diaz 11-1 in fights that end by submission. We saw Nate's got some big submission wins. He tapped out Jim Miller, Melvin Gillard, and Takanori Gomi. Well, Thompson also has wins over guys like Pat Healy and Dwayne Ludwig, so both have some high-profile submission victories. And there's some footage floating around. They've actually grappled against each other before, so I expect they'll both be comfortable and willing to go to the mat if the opportunity calls for it. Now, neither guy has high takedown numbers. Diaz averages 1 takedown a fight at 25%, while Thompson a little bit better at 1.7 at a 40% clip. Now, Nate's takedown defense, 46%, which is pretty decent, but he has had trouble with wrestlers in the past. We saw Benson Henderson dominate him with 8 takedowns, and Rory McDonald, when he fought at welterweight, nailed 7. So that's a big issue here if Nate cannot defend the takedown, as he could not against Henderson. Now, Thompson landed 4 takedowns against KJ Noons, and he did a nice job of tying up KJ's legs on the mat with that figure 4 position, and he really focuses on position over submission and maintaining a dominant spot on the ground as opposed to giving it up. And that's very important against a very good guard player like Nate Diaz. Thompson on the feet will stand in trading. He has power. We saw him hurt Melendez in that matchup. He just good head movement. He's kind of an unorthodox striker. He likes a lot of kicks, throws those low kicks, a nice front kick, which can really shut a guy down from moving forward. Body, head, use them to back KJ Noons up and really short circuit the boxing of Noons. And we know Nate Diaz has trouble with kicks, and I expect him to throw a lot of kicks at Nate Diaz to help make up for some of that reach disadvantage. Now, Nate, high volume striker, we're very aware, 3.55 strikes per minute, and compared to Thompson, 2.44. And I said he's got a 5-inch reach advantage. He's excellent boxing, and that's going to be a big advantage for Nate if he keeps this fight standing, if Josh can't deal with the distance. And Diaz has power. We saw him hurt Gomi, and he really put it on Donald Cerrone and did some damage there. So it's not like he's just a high-volume striker. He has the ability to hurt guys on the feet. Now, I think Ben Henderson laid the groundwork for beating Nate. He showed what Nate Diaz's holes, and what his holes are, and they still exist. A lot of people thought after the Jim Miller fight he had tightened things up to the point where they couldn't take him down. Ben Henderson proved otherwise. Both guys are rebounding from title fight losses, and Diaz got dominated in his fight against Ben Henderson. Well, Thompson, I thought he beat Gilbert Melendez, and he should be the champion coming into this. Either way, both very different performances in the title fight situation. Not that it really matters here. Thompson needs to use his speed, kicks, and takedowns. I think this is going to be a very close fight. It really could go either way. But my prediction is Josh Thompson to pick up the victory over Nate Diaz, and I'm going to take Thompson by decision. Now, in our co-main event of the night, we have a heavyweight bout between former UFC heavyweight champion Frank Mir, 16-6-0, and Strikeforce Grand Prix tournament champion Daniel Cormier, 11-0. Frank Mir coming to this fight off a title fight loss against Junior Dos Santos. Well, Daniel Cormier, undefeated 11-0. His last Strikeforce fight was a TKO victory over Dion Staring. Now, as I said, both are former champions. Physically, and we always get this disparity in the heavyweight division. I've talked about it before. Mir has a 4-inch height advantage and an 8-inch reach advantage and roughly 15 pounds on Cormier. But that's, great. Big advantage for Frank there. But Cormier has fought and defeated big men recently, guys like Josh Barnett and Antonio Silva. So this is not something new for DC. Now, Cormier, a decorated NCAA Division I wrestler and Olympic freestyle semifinals in 2004. He was the captain of Team USA in 2008. Didn't get to compete because of some health issues. But Frank Mir, black belt in karate and BJJ, potentially the best heavyweight on the ground. Fabricio Verdun might have something to say about that. And he's the only man to submit and knock out Big Nog. So Frank Mir, no slouch in the accreditation category. Now, on his career, Mir 3 wins by knockout, 9 by submission, and 3 wins by decision. But his big numbers, the 6 losses by knockout, including defeats to guys like JDS, Shane Carwin, and Brock. For Cormier, obviously undefeated, 5 wins by knockout, which was that big one over Antonio Silva in the semifinals. Also 3 wins by submission, 3 wins by decision. Cormier working out of AKA. The guy has been making remarkable strides in his striking. He has very fast hands. In every fight we see him just that much better. Now for Mir, he's actually moved to Greg Jackson's in preparation for this fight. I expect him to come up with a game plan, and the focus will be getting him in a position to use his submission game. Now Mir's striking has been improving, but that chin is a major issue. As we even saw in the Nog fight, he got clipped with a quick shot, and that hurt him. He will stand with guys, but he needs to avoid getting cracked by Cormier, and that's going to be very difficult. Now, Cormier, one of his biggest weapons is his takedown defense, 100%. Josh Barnett's a very takedown-oriented fighter. He went 0 for 1. He didn't even try that many takedowns. Jeff Munson 0 for 3 in his fight when he lost to Cormier. And Cormier can dictate where the fight takes place, and that is huge. Now, Mir averages 2.77 takedowns per fight at a 46% clip, so very, respectable. But he was 0 for 4 in the Junior Dos Santos fight, and he had trouble with the power wrestling of Brock Lesnar. So this is the type of fight where Mir traditionally cannot get his opponent on his back like he wants him to. Cormier could use takedowns in this fight, but I expect if he does, it'll be just like with Barnett, take him down and for the most part, take him down, put him there, and then get back on the feet as quickly as possible to avoid getting caught in a submission. Cormier can keep this fight standing. He needs to use his hand speed, ever-improving kickboxing repertoire, and just go to work on Frank and look for that chin. As I said, Mir needs to get this fight to the ground in a good position to use his BJJ, which is going to be tough against the Olympic wrestler. If Cormier does score a takedown, I said he'll need to be very careful not to jump into, or score a knockdown, sorry. If he hurts Frank and knocks him down, he cannot be hasty and jump on top of him and let defense just go out the window and go for the finish, because that's where Frank is dangerous. We saw it against Nogueira. He caught him in that brutal Kimura. Frank's a big, powerful man. He latches onto you. You could be in trouble. I expect a very similar approach for Cormier that he did against Jeff Munson and Josh Barnett. Focus on striking, defend the takedowns, keep it in a realm you're comfortable with. And my prediction is Daniel Cormier to defeat Frank Mir by TKO. Now in our main event prediction of the night, as I said, the UFC's lightweight title will be on the line as the champion, Benson Henderson, 17-2-0, will battle the former, or at least the last man to wear the Strikeforce belt. He's still the Strikeforce champion, Gilbert El Nino Melendez, 21-2-0. Henderson's won 6 fights in a row, coming off a win over Gilbert's teammate Nate Diaz, while Gilbert Melendez on a 7-fight winning streak with his last victory in Strikeforce over Josh Thompson. And looking at the date quickly, he's been out of action for a year or two, just like Thompson. So we'll see if that affects him making his debut. Now, Melendez on the ground, first thing I want to look at is the caliber of fighter. Melendez is a BJJ brown belt, and he's a former high school wrestler, but comparable to Benson Henderson, an NAIA All-American wrestler, Taekwondo black belt, which I know that's more standing and kicking, and also a BJJ brown belt. So certainly, I'd say the edge in that scenario goes to the UFC champion. Henderson on his career, 2 wins by knockout, 8 by submission, 8 by decision versus Gilbert, 11 wins by KO, only 1 sub and 9 decisions. So very different, set of ways that these guys can win their fights. Physically, these guys are almost even at 5'9", and Gilbert holding a slight 1-inch reach advantage. But if you look at the two fighters, Henderson's a very, very big lightweight. He could fight at welterweight easily. I think Gilbert could make featherweight if he tightened things up a little bit. So I think the actual physical advantage will go to Benson. Now, some of the statistical breakdowns, if you look at this, Gilbert averages 3.56 strikes landed per minute compared to Henderson only 2.93, so advantage for Gilbert there. But if you turn the tables around, strikes absorbed per minute, Henderson limits his opponents to 1.54 compared to 2.08 for Gilbert. So basically those stats are a wash. It's going to be very close in the striking area if this fight remains standing. Takedowns, Henderson 3.2 takedowns a fight at 51%, but Gilbert a 71% takedown defense, so that's very impressive, and he does a good job of keeping fights standing. For Melendez, he averages just under 2 takedowns per fight at a 44% clip, and Henderson also excellent takedown defense at 67%. So very good at getting guys on the ground, both very good at defending takedowns. Now Melendez, his 2 career defeats, in both of them, he lost the takedown battle by a wide margin of 13-3. It was 6-0 for Josh Thompson and 7-3 for Mitsuhiro Ishida. So that's very important And you look at the other fights in his wins, he's 24-12 comparing takedowns for him versus his opponent, and that's over 13 fights. So winning or at least not losing the takedown battle is essential for the success of Gilbert Melendez. Now, Ben used a heavy takedown attack against Nate Diaz. He landed 8 of 12. He went 7 for 7 against Jim Miller, and he did lose the takedown battle against Frankie Edgar 7-1. But he only tried a couple of takedowns there. He wanted to keep that fight standing a little bit more. Ben has a great sprawl when under attack. He uses underhooks. He gets very low. He has those powerful legs to help him push back. And he has excellent sub-defense if he gets in a position where he's under attack. Now, Melendez, if he can get on top, he's very solid. He has excellent elbows that we saw against Tetsuya Kawajiri. Good scrambles. We saw a number of ground battles with Josh Thompson. He's very capable of holding his own on the ground, but he's much better on top than he is off his back. Now, Henderson, if he gets on top, he has big shots. He really drops the elbows. He was heavy on top against Nate Diaz and brutalized him, hurt him several times. Same thing with Jim Miller. Bocek took a beating from him. And Ben Henderson really likes that guillotine submission. If he can lock it in, it's very dangerous. Now, Gilbert on the feet has the KO power advantage. He's got many more wins by knockout. He's very dangerous. Good boxing. He needs to pressure Ben, get inside that kicking range, and do some damage. Frankie hurt Henderson a couple of times with some shots, but he used a lot of speed and volume, and that's what Gilbert needs to emulate in this fight. For Henderson, Taekwondo background, he throws a lot of kicks. He can keep Gilbert at distance with those kicks. He can cover distance very quickly. He's very explosive, and he has decent hands too. Not quite as proficient as a Frankie Edgar or even a Gilbert Melendez with his hands, but he's still very solid. One thing I look at is Ben is much better when he's coming forward. In the Anthony Pettis fight, he was backing up, and he needs to avoid that against Gilbert Melendez, or else Gilbert can dictate the pace of the fight. Now, Gilbert looked a little uninspired in his last 2 matchups, but I expect him to be fired up for his UFC debut, but at the same time, that can create that adrenaline dump. And, that's an issue. And he hasn't faced a lot of adversity in his career, and I think Ben Henderson's going to put him in some bad spots, and that's going to be tough for Gilbert to deal with. Another thing I look at, big advantage in quality of opponent face. Henderson's faced guys like Frankie Edgar twice, Anthony Pettis, Jim Miller, Nate Diaz, Donald Cerrone, Clay Guida. Well, Gilbert Melendez, his biggest opponent, Josh Thompson, he fought 3 times. George Masvidal, Kawajiri, Aoki, and Rodrigo Dam are the last 3 names I talked about there, Kawajiri as well. Those are all featherweights now, so you really question some of the big names that Melendez has faced, and the advantage clearly in favor of Ben Henderson. I think Henderson's going to have the advantage in the big 3 categories. Better cardio, he's going to be the faster fighter, so he'll have the speed advantage, and his strength is going to be huge. I think he'll overwhelm Gilbert Melendez, so my prediction is Ben Henderson to defeat Gilbert Melendez by TKO and retain and unify the UFC and Strikeforce lightweight titles. So those are my predictions for this weekend's UFC on Fox 7 event. 4 main card fights. All 9 of my preliminary predictions will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net. And my bet packs, they are on fire, so please consider investing in one of them. I've done very well of late, and the Fox events I don't know what it is, I just always seem to do well. I'm going to post some stats on that and show you how well I do. Check out the website. Also, the public picks. Make your picks, and I keep the stats if you scroll to the bottom. And there are some trends you're starting to see where when the public's in favor of this fighter so much, you can see how they fare. And it's starting to make some money. I made some money off it on the last show, so certainly take a look at that. It's worth noting. Also, the Kamikaze Overdrive Prediction Tournament. Sign up, get involved. As I said, bar none, the hardest MMA fantasy tournament to win on the web. It's very difficult. I got to the 3rd round last year. That's as far as I got in a 5-round tournament. It's unique. It's difficult. Sign up. It's only $5. As always, thank you for listening. Lots of MMA on the horizon. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.